as historians have already labeled it. I think there is kind of a return to the land ethos that is out there. You know, our First Lady has planted a garden in the south lawn of the White House. I mean, as a farmer, I think that's pretty cool stuff. I like the idea that we're encouraging people to get dirt under the fingernails again and reconnect with the land. And if that leads to more kids sticking toothpicks in avocado seeds and putting it in a glass of water and seeing that the roots go down and the shoots go up and learning more about all of these things, that's wonderful. Because I mean, as somebody who grew up in going to Farm Bureau meetings and cattlemen's dinners and all that, all we ever did was complain to each other about how no one appreciates the farmer. Well, that's a positive trend in people understanding where food comes from and why these things are important. You know, books by Michael Pollan and movies like Food, Inc. These are driving this kind of new discussion about how our food is produced. In many ways in sensationalized manners, but it is driving the popular discussion, and we can't be oblivious to that. And so this locally grown movement, this preference for locally grown, I think presents opportunities for farmers, particularly as a Floridian. And I know not all of our audience is from Florida, but if you're serious about locally grown produce, and you're going to be committed to it, and you're serious about it in January, well, then there's only about 3 states where they're going to be able to provide that for you, and we happen to live in one of them. So that's actually a great, I think, marketing opportunity, a great economic model that really benefits small farmers again. People who are, you know, I mean, with rising land costs and lack of access to credit, small farmers who have less acreage now have an opportunity through a confluence of events, a return to the land, a renewed concern about being locally grown. They have an opportunity now to make money, to find a market if they only have 2 acres of squash or 5 acres of beans or 25 chickens in the yard. As they develop strategic relationships with restaurants or with farmers markets in mid-sized cities who want to be able to get a premium price for a product that they can market as being produced locally, and to be able to print in their menu that they have Plant City strawberries and Ruskin tomatoes and Williston blue cheese and you know, just the whole range of issues, and be able to charge 50% more, and more power to them. I think that benefits everyone. So these are some of the mega trends that I think are impacting not just big agriculture, but this really exciting small agriculture that has seen a real spike in growth in the last several years. In fact, the number of farms in Florida last year grew 7%, and it was all at the small farm level. So backing back up to the national policy, what does all this mean? Well, we have some real challenges when you look at where the other 99% of our agriculture is coming from these large operations in dealing with the challenges. You have climate change legislation that has a huge impact on production agriculture in America. It has passed the House. The bill as it currently exists is known as cap and trade. It is finding very little enthusiasm in the Senate, and the likelihood of its passage, I think, is pretty dim. I don't believe that cap and trade will pass the Senate. It would be a pretty historically rapid passage of something so big and so different and so new. I mean, nothing that big and that different and that new passes on its second try. And there's only been one vote on this in the past, and it was a year ago. So I just don't think that moves, but it has certainly put people down the path of that at some point everyone's going to have to deal with what their carbon footprint is. And when I'm speaking to farm groups, they all breathe a sigh of relief that cap and trade's not going to pass. But I remind them that it may not matter whether Uncle Sam requires you to know what your carbon footprint is. If Walmart requires you to do it, then you're going to have to know it anyway. And that's the direction that the major retailers are moving. They want to know what all of their vendors' carbon footprints are, what their water footprints are, so that they can then advertise to their customers that we're demanding that all of our vendors reduce their carbon footprint by 5% or 10% or 3% or whatever they choose, which will probably be determined by the marketing department, not the food science department. And that's just the reality. In fact, growing up in the citrus industry, still being in the citrus industry, I have reminded my fellow citrus growers that Pepsi-Cola thought this was important enough that they commissioned a study to find out how much carbon was in a half gallon of orange juice. And when they found out, they weren't exactly sure what to do with that information. Nobody really knew what. So we have this data. What do we do with it? But they were looking over the horizon far enough to know that at some point this is going to be relevant data. And let's figure out how we go about even determining what that number is, so that perhaps we could market ourselves as being the lowest carbon footprint orange juice on the market. I mean, that may be where we're going. So climate change and carbon-related issues clearly are a big part of public policies that will continue to impact farm practices and then by definition farm waste, which is what we're all here to try and help solve the problem of. The other big issue, some of which is national in scope and some of which is Florida specific, is the idea of nutrient loads. And while most of the really big confined animal feeding operations are not in Florida, in terms of what's being regulated by the Clean Water Act and what people think of in terms of these really mega lagoons coming off of swine farms and things like that, there's been litigation in Florida that really drives this home. And for those of you who are doing business in Florida and understand this, this could be a lethal blow to agriculture in the state of Florida if we don't find a way to work through it. Florida has a model total maximum daily load program under the Clean Water Act, but Florida was a leader in it. In fact, I'm told that 46% of all of the data in the nation on nutrient loads in lakes are Florida lakes. I mean, it's because Florida has done such a good job of understanding what these nutrient loads are for their streams, their flowing rivers, the lakes, and then the coastal waters and estuarine bodies of water. Well, in addition to that, the EPA and Earth Justice have just come to an agreement and a consent decree that is in the process of being ratified that would require a nutrient load for nitrogen and phosphorus for every lake and stream in Florida by 2000 and by October of 2010, and then by October of 2011 for the coastal waters. The science isn't there to do that for every single body of water yet. And that will have huge impacts on anyone who's up for permit renewal. And so I'm here as much as anything to ask you to include that in your problem-solving portfolio, that as we all try and solve these problems of managing the waste and using technology to build that into a closed-loop cycle, to harvest energy off of that waste, to export nutrients in terms of some of the things going on in the Okeechobee Basin, where they're spraying lagoon-treated water on hay fields and then exporting the hay to another state, using the best possible science as we continue to look for ways to build methane digesters. This issue of the nutrient load in this litigation is going to be critically important. If that issue is